Well, as Adam mentioned, my primary focus is on threats to US elections that come from overseas and how this foreign interference impacts our election security, our domestic media, our social media, and of course, our campaigns. We know that foreign adversaries want us to be divided and susceptible to inflammatory information online. They want our system to be in chaos. These attacks are happening all the time, even though we can't see many of them. To reiterate what we heard from Kim Wyman, the election lead at CISA and the Department of Homeland Security a little earlier today, she said that cyber attacks on our campaigns and elections are wider and more pervasive than ever, and many of those come from overseas. Today, I will cover the types of attacks on our elections that we've seen come from other countries. I'll discuss some ways we can spot these attacks and protect ourselves against them, and then touch on the US government's actions right now to counter these threats, including in our upcoming midterm elections. Of course, we have primaries in some states in our country happening just today. The Department of Homeland Security warned about this threat of foreign interference in our elections in its June 7th bulletin. You can see it up here on the screen, the summary of it. DHS wrote, foreign adversaries remain intent on exploiting the dynamic threat environment to sow discord, undermine US democratic institutions, and promote or inspire violence by their supporters. In order to achieve these goals, hostile foreign countries have launched several types of attacks on our democracy. Cliff Newman discussed many of these earlier, and I'm going to dive into a little more detail right now. First, we've seen the hacking and public release of campaign documents by a hostile foreign entity with the goal of influencing an election in favor of their preferred candidate. Think WikiLeaks or the Clinton campaign DNC emails, which were hacked by a Russian organization working with Moscow's intelligence service in 2016. And as I'm sure all of us remember, those hacks and the emails released became a key topic in the 2016 elections. On the slide, you can see someone holding up a homemade sign at a campaign rally with the hashtag DNC leaks on it. Second, we've seen public misinformation campaigns waged largely on social media designed to create division in our country. Here's how that works. Foreign actors create fake accounts that appear to be real American voters, but they're actually trolls or bots. And then those fake accounts promote propaganda, conspiracy theories, or just outright lies. And then those are often shared by real people thinking that they're true and that they're sharing something from another American voter. This is where hostile foreign governments try to rile up Americans against one another and make us distrust our own elections outcomes by promoting false conspiracy theories. On the slide here is an example of that kind of attack. @10GOP is a Twitter account that claims to represent Tennessee Republicans. But it turns out that this account was not affiliated with the state party or with any Tennessee Republicans at all. @10GOP was a Kremlin-linked bot, and the entity ended up as part of a federal grand jury indictment for essentially waging information warfare to help a preferred candidate. The account did this by posting inflammatory and inaccurate information and conspiracy theories, all the while pretending to be an American political organization. We've also seen the scanning and probing of voter registration rolls and other voter data by Russia. And there's no public evidence that this data has ever been altered, but it's an area that folks are certainly keeping a close eye on, that they're concerned about. There is also, of course, the ever-present threat of ransomware attacks by criminal groups tied to hostile foreign governments. In general, foreign ransomware attacks have been on the rise. We've all seen the press stories about it, I'm sure. And there's no reason to think that elections infrastructure or political entities or third-party vendors that many of us use for election-related work won't be targets as well. Finally, foreign intelligence services around the world are working to penetrate political campaigns across our country to gather information about candidates, even low-profile candidates, that they can then use against American politicians once they're in office. As we meet today, US security officials are worried about what foreign governments might do around the upcoming midterms. Much of the concern centers around Russia and how it could exploit American divisions and seed false conspiracy theories about the integrity of our elections. Here's one example of a scenario that security officials are particularly worried about. Russian hackers could breach a local county voter registration system. They could get into it, they could breach it, they could basically hack into it. But here's the plot twist. They actually want to get caught. They want to get detected. They would then post information online, take responsibility instead of blaming other people like they did in 2016. And then other Russian-backed forces would amplify the problems on Facebook and Twitter. And basically their goal would be churning up angry reactions among Americans and playing into this distrust that we've seen here that's been sown with the American public about the integrity and security of our elections. Russia isn't the only country undertaking this kind of activity, but they're definitely the most prolific and the most aggressive that we've seen. And despite international outcry since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Russian embassy accounts around the world have actually received more online engagement since the invasion than before, which they've used to promote Russian propaganda on a whole host of issues. There are other countries who are active in this space as well, including Iran, China, and many others. For all of these reasons, elections infrastructure has been designated as critical by the US government, which allows DHS to provide prioritized cybersecurity services at the request of state and local officials. Everyone should definitely take advantage of that. Each player in the elections business on this slide represents a potential vulnerability to one of those types of attacks I outlined above. That's a lot of things to secure if you look at all the different pieces on this slide. So what can we do? First, use good operational security, as we heard earlier from Cliff, have multiple layers of security and not just one single point of failure. Second, we have to train ourselves, campaigns, political parties, and elections officials how to detect foreign-based information, including how to spot bots by doing things like looking for hyperactivity, more than 50 to 60 tweets a day, or unlikely popularity for a very recently started account. Here on this slide is an example of this kind of bot. In August 2017, an account called @KirstenKellogg posted a tweet attacking US media outlet ProPublica, which is a left-leaning media outlet. This Twitter account had very low activity, only 76 followers, and wasn't following any other accounts themselves. But its post was retweeted and liked over 23,000 times. So chances are that's not real, and it's likely coming from overseas somewhere. These are the kinds of things to look out for, but most importantly, as Sarah just said, what you should avoid sharing if you do come across it. Tech companies also have to do more to help combat the proliferation of disinformation. Social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter have civic responsibilities as they grapple with the disinformation that flourishes on their platforms, much of which originates overseas. There are many ways these companies can track where online information comes from, including that infamous anecdote from the 2016 election about Facebook ads dealing with our election that were paid for in Russian rubles. The two ads on this slide from someone called, quote, being patriotic, actually were paid for in Russian rubles. Chances are those probably aren't coming from inside the United States. There's also been reporting in recent weeks that Facebook parent company Meta may be quietly rolling back some of the safeguards it had put in place to combat voting misinformation or foreign interference in US elections. We're certainly tracking that and digging into that. And Twitter just recently posted their plan for the 2022 midterms about how they plan to combat misinformation as well. Finally, we and our allies have to use whatever tools we have to pressure countries like Russia if they continue to meddle in foreign political systems. Recently, the director of the NSA and the head of Cyber Command, the same person, General Paul Nakasone, he's up there on the screen, he said in an interview that we are going to be full bore against foreign interference and influence in our elections. He said he was very focused on whether ransomware would disrupt the upcoming midterm elections, and that the US is conducting a series of operations right now to prevent that from happening. After the foreign interference in our 2016 election, Cyber Command was given more authority to conduct offensive operations overseas. And he has said that his team conducted more than 24 operations to get ahead of foreign threats before the 2020 election, so using that new authority. The Election Security Group, which is led by NSA and Cyber Command and includes members from across the US government, is focused on doing the same thing in future elections. So many parts of the federal government are also involved in this fight. Just last week, the Justice Department unsealed an indictment against a Russian citizen who was working on behalf of the Russian government, who allegedly orchestrated a years-long foreign influence campaign that used various US political groups to sow discord, to spread pro-Russian propaganda, and interfere in elections within the United States. From 2014, at least 2014, until 2022, this Russian citizen recruited political groups within the United States. So out in the country where all of us are, they recruited groups, one in Florida, one in Georgia, and one in California, and exercised direction or control over them on behalf of Russian intelligence. He provided financial support to these groups, directed them to publish pro-Russian propaganda, coordinated and funded direct action by these groups within the United States intended to further Russian interests, and then coordinated coverage of all this activity in Russian media outlets. The US State Department has also offered up to $10 million in a reward to anyone who provides information on foreign interference in US elections. This is part of its Rewards for Justice program. It's been used in the past to go after terrorists or organized criminal leaders, drug traffickers, and now it's being used against people who interfere in our elections. The program aims to gather information that leads to the identification or location of any foreign person or entity who is engaging in foreign elections interference. These are exactly the kinds of tools the US and our partners are going to have to deploy to counter this threat. The US government has immense technical tools at its disposal, but a lot of the most important work actually happens at the state and local level with all of you, which is why we're all here talking today. We need to keep working to secure our elections, but most importantly, to not sow doubts about the legitimacy of those elections. We can't give these hostile foreign governments an opening to exploit. We know they've done it in the past and they will do it again if given the chance. So let's not do that. Let's all work together to prevent that from happening. With that, Adam, I'll turn it back to you.